In this video, we'll talk about some unsaturated hydrocarbons. Particularly, we'll look at naming alkenes and naming alkynes. So for the unsaturated hydrocarbons, these are going to be ones that contain double bonds or triple bonds between the carbons. So this will mean that not all of the carbons are going to be sp3 hybridized, and that also means that we're not going to have the maximum number of hydrogens in these hydrocarbons. An alkene is going to be a hydrocarbon that contains a carbon-carbon double bond. So here's an example of an alkene. An alkyne is going to contain a carbon-carbon triple bond. So there would be an example of an alkyne. For naming alkenes, the parent molecule is going to be the longest chain that contains the double bond. So even if there's a longer chain, if it doesn't contain the double bond, that will not be the parent chain. Otherwise, those will be named pretty similar to alkanes, except instead of ending in -ane, the suffix is going to end in -ene. So here's an example where we have 4 carbons in a chain and 1 double bond. So the parent chain for this is going to be butene. So we have the -ene instead of the -ane, but we start with this but prefix. Here's another compound. So if we were going to count these, again, we want the longest chain that contains the double bond. So we'll start here and make the longest chain that we can. So with this chain highlighted, what would be the parent of this particular hydrocarbon? That's correct. So this would have 5 in the chain, would use the prefix pent, and then the suffix -ene. So this would be a pentene. In addition to the other rules for alkanes, we also have to name where the double bond appears because it can be in multiple locations, and then we still name the substituents if there are any. So here's this example for butene, and in this case we're going to call it 1-butene, and here's that other one with a longer chain, the pentene, starting with the same numbering. That would be 2-ethyl 1-pentene. Let's talk a little bit now about how we number where the double bond is. So again, we want to minimize the numbering. So we'll make the double bond first, and we'll name it from where it first appears. So we start with this 1 carbon, that's the beginning of the double bond. So this is where we get the 1 from the 1-butene. Again, from this longer chain, it's starting from the 1 to 2. So this will be a 1-pentene. And then with this numbering, since we're starting with the number that minimizes the location of the double bond, that puts the ethyl group at the 2 position. So this will be a 2-ethyl 1-pentene. If it's ambiguous and we can number from multiple places, we are going to give priority to the double bond over any other alkyl groups. So for this hydrocarbon, we can do the chain like that. We could also do the chain this way. It'll be the same longest chain either way. When we're in the numbering, if we number from this end, we'll get the smallest possible order from the double bond. Whereas if we ordered from the other end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we'd get a lower number for the alkyl group, but this is incorrect because we want to minimize the number for the double bond. So in this case, this would be a 3-octene, and then our methyl group would be at the 7 position. So this would be 7-methyl 3-octene. If multiple double bonds are present, we have to indicate this by putting di, tri, or tetra in front of the -ene, and we also have to say the position of all of these bonds. Again, we will try and minimize the location numbers, so we'll find the shortest possible to the first bond, and so on and so forth. So here's an example where we have 2 double bonds. We could draw it like this in the line angle form. And here we see that it's between the 1 and 2, and 3 and 4. So this would be a 1,3-buta for the prefix, di since there's 2 of the double bonds, and then -ene for the suffix. So this is a 1,3-butadiene. Okay, so what is the name of this molecule using all the rules that we've learned? All right, so if you didn't get that, let me show you how we'd get to this number, or this answer. Okay, so let's take a look. first we want to identify the longest chain with the double bonds. So that would be this one. We have to make sure we get that one on the bottom, and then we have to grab one of these groups on the end. And then we would want to look at how it would start numbering this. We want to minimize the numbers, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minimizing the numbers for the double bonds. And now we look at our substituents. So here we have 2 carbons, so this is an ethyl group. 2 carbons here, so we have 2 ethyl groups. And here at the end, we have 1 methyl group. And there's 2 double bonds. So this will be a 2 ethyl, 1 methyl diene. And now we need to make sure we get all the other names and the right order for this. So remember, we start the substituents alphabetically. So we will start with the ethyl groups. And there are 2 of them, so there's one at the 2 position and one at the 3 position. So that gives us the 2, 3. And then since there's 2 ethyl groups, this is diethyl. Next we'll follow by the methyl group. There's only 1 of them, so we don't need a prefix, we just need to say its location. So here it is at the 4 position, so this is 4-methyl. And then for the diene, we have to say the position of those bonds, so they start at 1 and 3, so this will be a 1, 3. And since we have 5 carbons in the parent chain, this is a pent. So penta, and 2 of the double bonds, so di, and then the ene for the suffix. So we have 2,3 diethyl, 4-methyl, 1,3 pentadiene. Because these unsaturated hydrocarbons contain multiple bonds, we have to remember that pi bonds are rigid. So this means we actually have possibilities for isomerism in alkenes and these other molecules with the rigid bonds. So we can have geometric cis and trans isomers. And let's look at a case here where we have, again, a butene, so 4 carbons. But since this bond can't rotate, we can either have these 2 carbons on the same side of the double bond or these 2 on opposite sides of the double bond. And so we indicate this using cis and trans. And so in this case, we have a cis 2-butene versus a trans 2-butene. For naming cyclic alkenes, these are going to follow very similar rules to cyclic alkanes. The double bond will get the priority, and we'll minimize the numbers when we're ordering them. Something like the cyclohexene, since there's only 1 double bond, we don't need to number it. If we have 2 like this, we want to minimize the numbering, so we would start close to 1 of them and go around the shortest way possible to the next one. And so here we have 8, so this would be a cyclooctene, but there's 2 double bonds here, so we have to point out their positions. So this would be 1 for cyclooctadiene. For this compound, again, we'd have to see where the double bond is. It's in the ring, so we'll name the ring structure here. So this is going to be a hexene, and then we have to point out the functional group, and we want to minimize the position of the double bond. So here we would call this a 4-ethyl cyclohexene. Note in this case we don't actually have to number the position of the ene. Telling it that it is 4-ethyl tells us where this ethyl group is relative to the only double bond we have, so we don't need to number them. If we had multiple double bonds in the ring, we would have to do like the cyclooctadiene to position both of the double bonds and then also the functional group. For naming alkynes, this is going to be the parent molecule that has the longest chain that contains the triple bond in the alkyne. So if we look down here, that would be one of these chains containing the triple bond. And instead of the suffix "-ene" or "-ane", we use the suffix "-ine". The rest of the rules are all going to be the same as for alkenes. So in this case, our parent chain has 6, and so this would be 5-methyl, from the position of the methyl group, and minimizing, again, the position of the multiple bond. So 5-methyl, 2-hexyne.